My name is Aleksandra Rykowska, and I am starting my PhD studies in October this year at the Jagiellonian University in Kraków, in Poland. It is going to be a project about the stylometry of machine translation, and what I am going to present today is just a quick introduction to what I am going to do during my PhD. And it is going to be more of a corpus study, so it is more linguistic than technical today. Let's introduce you to where it all started. I wanted to translate with DeepL or Google Translate a very simple sentence in Polish, which is Apache jedzą chipsy. In English, it is the Apaches are eating chips. And in German, the translation was Apache fressen chips. And to any of you who knows German, then you probably know that fressen is the word that is supposed to be used only for animals, only to describe animals eating. So this is a very strong bias that we can see here, and it is produced both by DeepL and Google Translate, and it has not changed during the half of a year that I proposed the paper here and today when I am presenting. This is what inspired me to do actually the whole presentation. So I think you all know that, but where does the bias come from? First of all, it is impossible to control the number and the content of the text that are put into the training of the neural networks that are behind the translations. It is also easier to scrap older texts, which are probably more biased. And also, we human beings are still racist and sexist, and we generally do not care about what we put on the web. So it is all scrapped and put into the training data, which is very, very sad. So Susan Brown at the opening keynote said that ChatGPT has the information that it can make mistakes, but also sometimes it can force us to make mistakes. And it is the case also with the minority groups, because when we ask ChatGPT to produce us a sentence or a story about the Eskimo people, it is going to correct us and say that we should use the term Inuit people. And it is incorrect, because what is actually harmful is calling all the people from the north Inuits. It is producing more bias by teaching us not to be biased. So it is a different study about gender bias in automatically produced text. And this is the very basic word-to-back experiment, where we have a man is to a king as a woman is to a something. And of course, we expect a man is to a king as a woman is to a queen, which is what we get. But if we replace the king with computer programmer, we are going to end up with the word housemaid. So this is also a very strong gender bias that we can observe in the texts. So what I did was to, first of all, prepare the corpora, and it was in two parts. First one was 100 sentences in 5 languages, with a representative of the minority group being the subject of the sentence, and then choosing 25 minority groups to produce short stories. And then I conducted the analysis on those texts. So as I mentioned, I picked 5 languages because I was comfortable reading in them. And I also wanted to have 3 languages that were highly represented in the training data, which were English, French, and German, and 2 which were poorly represented, which is Polish and Lithuanian, because I thought that the bias would be more visible in the poorly represented languages. I tried to balance the corpus so that each language is represented by the same number of texts, and they are all generated with the same version of ChatGPT. I used the exact translations of the same prompts, and I had over 25 minority groups that were chosen also by ChatGPT. I wanted to do that to see if even by choosing some minority groups, we are going to have some kind of bias. And as you can see, this is the map of the minority groups that I was provided with, and there is no representation of South America, for example. So it is more focused on the groups from Europe and Asia. The sentences I have generated about minority groups, even though I asked ChatGPT to make the sentences of a random topic, and I gave the example of eating chips, as what should follow the subject of the sentence, the first prompt was always resulting with sentences that had some kind of stereotype or some information typical for the minority group. Then in French, Polish, and Lithuanian, the second prompt gave me sentences that were actually random topic. And in English and German, ChatGPT only produced sentences which did not contain any kind of stereotypes after the third prompt. And still after the third prompt, as you can see in German, for example, it produced a sentence with a very stereotypical information about the Romanian people, that they often travel. So what is also interesting is how some of the more popular, let's say, minority groups are represented. So when we ask ChatGPT about, for example, a story of Jews, it is also always going to end or contain some kind of information of Holocaust and of some kind of brutal attack that is targeted towards the people. So this is in Polish. And this is the translation of the story in Polish. And here is the part where the village, the town, where the main character is from, is being destroyed by some evil forces. And it never ends with the brutal information. There is always an information of the main character surviving and using the power and bravery and unity of the minority group to overcome the difficulty. But still, there is always some kind of mention of Holocaust when we have a story about the Jews. And when we have stories about Romanian people, there is always a mention of them traveling in every language that I tested. So also there is this thing that I mentioned before about the name Eskimo. It also happens with the Romanian people. I first asked about Romanian people and then wanted to see what is going to be the response of ChatGPT when I ask about gypsies. And in English, as you can see, we have an information that this is not the proper term and we should not be using it. But if we do the same thing in Polish, which is at the bottom, then it has no problem generating a story about gypsies, because Cygan is the exact translation of gypsy in Polish. And it is very happy to provide us with the story about the gypsies. So moving on to the corpus analysis, I have prepared a keyword analysis and also the medium frequent words analysis, because I skipped the pronouns. So here you can see the keywords for Polish. I highlighted the ones that seemed interesting for me. And in Polish, what was interesting, that any kind of stories about the cultural heritage, so for example, the clothing or the arts of the minority group, the main character was feminine. And when there was some kind of conflict or a war happening in the within the group, the main character was masculine. And here you can also see that the artisan was a feminine form, which was one of the highest keywords for the Polish text. And szanowany, which means well-respected, was one of the main keywords for the masculine part of the texts. And those are the frequent words. And here we can see that just most of the words are going to be about some villages and the unity, bravery of the group. And it is going to be the same case within all the languages. So I can show you, this is for French, the keywords and the frequent words. This is for German. And here what is starting is that you can see more mystical words. So we have dreamcatcher, we have legends, we have mysterious things. So the minority groups are something mysterious for us in here. They are portrayed like that. The same thing is with Lithuanian. And in English, there are no such words, but we have the power and the heritage and the resilience and the unity of the minority groups that we ask the ChatGPT to describe. So when I was starting my studies, I had a course on orientalization in literature, and our teacher asked us to imagine Africa. And then she showed us those pictures and asked who had this kind of picture of Africa in their mind. And the majority of the classroom raised their hands. And then she showed us those pictures and said, well, but you know, this is also actually Africa, and this is most of Africa. So you're highly biased, and there is a stereotype living in your heads. And this is what happens in the 18th and 19th century in literature in Polish. And it's also happening in your minds, and it is also happening in ChatGPT. So these are some observations that the text usually emphasize the mysterious, different, and mystical nature of the groups that we want him to describe. And it is more spiritually and mystical themed, the text that we get. There are some exotic attributes that are mentioned a lot in the stories, like amulets, turbans, and so on. And the text in English usually differ from the others. So there we have the courage, independence, and skills of the characters that are emphasized in the stories. And for my future work, I want to find a way to somehow tag the stereotypes automatically, and I want to test it stylometrically if the texts generated by ChatGPT are close to the ones that are highly orientalized. And also, it is important for me to look into the etymology of names that ChatGPT proposes for the main characters, because, for example, in the Apache community, 2 out of 5 stories had the main character, which was called Rojo. In Spanish, it's red. So we have even the bias in the name of the main character. So these are the references, and thank you for your attention.